Welcome into University of Hoops, the show that gives you an inside look at the people making everything happen on your favorite basketball team. Today, we welcome Marquette Director of Creative Content and Social Media, Josh Levin. Josh, welcome to the show, man.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited.
Yeah, absolutely excited to talk about what you do at Marquette and to get into your journey to how you got to where you are. Let's just start with the fact that, March Madness just ended. You guys were able to win a couple games and stay competitive, down the stretch. What was this season like for you and what was March Madness like?
This season was a ton of fun. I mean, having come off of dual championships last year, regular season and tournament in the Big East. It was going to be hard to top, but we basically brought everybody back but Omax Prosper, who went to the NBA. So it was kind of nice to be able to run it back with the same group. It was a lot of fun. Shaka said it himself after the Sweet 16 loss that it's tied for his favorite team that he's ever coached. And I would say I definitely can understand where that's coming from. This great group of guys. Every day is so much fun with them. March Madness, it was great to get to the second weekend this year. It was just really cool to experience that and see what it's like to get a little further on, and hopefully we can continue to get further in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely seeing you on our guest list was rooting for you guys. Absolutely. And always love Shaka Smart's teams and Tyler Kolek was really fun.
Unbelievable.
Fun player to watch and
Yeah.
just in some of those games single-handedly just like bringing you guys through and then of course good support pieces as well. So very fun team to watch. So you've been at Marquette since 2021, correct?
Yeah, full time.
Okay, got it. So take us through your title. That's a hefty title, right?
Mhm.
Director, creative content, social media. That's a lot. And of course, I work in content. Like I know what each of those things entail to do all of that. That's a lot. So take us through what your responsibilities are like and what you would enjoy about it.
Yeah, so as my role, or in my role, I'm the director of creative content and social media for all of the athletics. And at Marquette, we have 12 teams. So I'm responsible for making sure that there's strategy and planning and coverage for all those teams on a day-to-day basis. I'm running the socials, doing all the video editing for the men's basketball program, as well as a lot of the graphics. As you can imagine, that's a lot of work to take on. So it's more of an overview for the other sports, and then really, at least during basketball season, honing in completely on that. Just it takes more than a full day every day. So just gotta kind of rely on my students, and it's a great opportunity for them to learn and grow as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, within that craziness, what's a game day look like for you versus a non-game day?
Mhm. So non-game days, I mean, it depends on what we got going on. The one thing that I really like about this job is every day is different. Being in an office setting before, like just doing a normal type of job, the repetitiveness of going into the office and doing the same thing for months on end is kind of can get a little boring. So, to be able to come into the office, work on a different type of project every day, kind of based on what's coming up, what just happened recently, that's really exciting to me. And then for game days, it depends on the game. If it's a home game, we only shoot around for select games. If it's a really big opponent, maybe we'll stop by there, or if one of our NBA alumni or someone else is coming to speak to the guys at the end, we'll stop by and try to get some stuff for that. And then really just kind of running the show. I have one full-time person who's kind of more in an SID role, but he's our secondary communications person for basketball, and his name's Robbie Fulton, and he's an amazing help to me. He kind of helps me on game days. Like he runs our Twitter and kind of helps manage my students because I'm still our primary videographer. So, I'm shooting the game from warm-ups all the way through the locker room at the end of the game, and like, constantly checking my phone and going through the chat and saying, we got this clip, let's post this, let's edit this way. Here's some copy ideas, that kind of stuff. Just kind of rely heavily on Robbie to help run that show too. So,
Got it. Got it. One thing that I like sort of like recently to ask all of our guests that are coming from D1 or college places is how is the transfer portal impacting your job? And I know it's one thing on like the coaching and the basketball ops
mhm.
side, and then on like the content side, like when you talk about like just being able to keep track of all that and um what happens like when you find out that somebody's transferring or somebody's coming in, like what that process is like in terms of okay, this is when we're gonna post it or whatever. Like
Mhm.
how does that impact your job?
Well, I'm very fortunate to be with the team I'm with because Shaka doesn't really rely on the portal. He's all about player development. So we want to recruit a player as a freshman and then have him play until he's a senior or he's ready to go to the league. And I think there's a lot to be said for that in today's world to have that consistency. Obviously, the first year there were a couple freshmen that came in that made a huge impact, and then he brought in a couple transfers who, weren't expected to make huge splashes, and one of them ended up being Tyler Kolek, who became, a back-to-back consensus All-American. But since that day, we've only brought in one transfer so far. And then only have had a couple guys to transfer out just, not because they didn't like the program, but just, there's only so many opportunities for everybody. So it's made it a lot easier to have to keep track of everything. We're really just worried about, who's gonna be moving on to the NBA. That's the most exciting thing that we have to deal with.
Speaking of Shaka, I got to ask you just like what it's like working for him from your position. And then what's your best Shaka Smart story if you got one?
Um, Let's see. I mean, Shaka is great. He really is the type of guy that you see on TV. He's passionate. He cares about these guys a ton. I really respect the way he wants to run the program, culture first, player driven. And I try to portray that on social. That's really the biggest thing for us. So yeah, I mean it's a lot of fun to work for him and to be involved with it is really an honor. As far as a story, I don't know. I don't know if I really can tell this one, but it's nothing that bad. It's not really actually even something he did, but coach is a vegetarian or pescatarian, I forget which specifically, but so it was the first road trip we ever took. It was for a close scrimmage. We went to Boston College and we're getting on the bus to head back to the airport after the scrimmage and the food was super late, so our ops people they were scrambling to get everything ready. I'm like trying to get on the bus and I'm a picky eater myself, so they were like, "Oh, do you want here, like take this pub burger?" And I'm like, "Oh, no problem. Like I'll take the burger. No, I don't want to be a hassle and ask what's in there, what's on it, whatever." So I take it and I take one bite when I get on the bus and I'm like, "Oh, it's got mushrooms." And someone goes, "Oh no. You just ate Coach's mushroom burger." So the first road trip, they're scrambling like, oh my God, we got to get Coach a new meal now. Like this is the first time he's traveling with us. Like, oh God, this is gonna be a disaster. Luckily, I mean, I think they got him food at the delivered to the plane and everything was fine. But just the irony that I'm a picky eater and I was trying to not cause a problem, that I ended up eating Coach's food. It was pretty funny.
Josh, that's too good, man.
Hey, he
That's
didn't
a
know it was me for a while, I think.
you had to
They tried to
build
keep
that
that.
trust up with him and be like, Coach, it was me.
So now we'll
I-
laugh about it every once in a while. Hey, remember that time that I ate your food?
Yeah, it's funny how that happened. Life has a funny way of doing that to you too. Sometimes you set your intentions one way and then it happens anyways, and you have to just laugh about it. So glad that that was the case.
Yeah.
Now that we talked more about where you are today, want to kind of get into your journey to how you got to where you are. The first thing I want to ask you is like take us back to the beginning of all of this. Did you initially even like want to work in sports? I know, especially with content people, like sometimes it's like they don't. We had somebody who's the videographer for the Nuggets on earlier in our in our first season of this show, and he was talking about how he like it kind of happened to him by happenstance. So that's what I want to ask you first. Like, did you
Yeah.
know that you wanted to work in sports, and then once you figured it out, like how did you get to where you are now?
Yeah, so I actually this is kind of how I always tell the story. I was always creative. As a kid, I was always drawing things, doodling, whatever. And I grew up in the suburbs of Chicago, so going downtown all the time. I was super interested in the city, the skyline, stadiums, stuff like that. So I wanted to get into architecture. I thought, reasonably practical way to use your creativity. Maybe one day I'll get to design a skyscraper or a stadium or something like that. And so I went to high school, and I actually took some architecture classes, was really interested in it, learned Photoshop and like a couple architecture programs. And then I went to University of Illinois to get my bachelor's in architecture, and went through that whole program. That program's a grind. A lot of people don't know it, but architecture is a very, very hard field. It's actually in some ways similar to sports in terms of like the workload and the hours, and there can be a lot of travel involved. So I was, planning to do that. I had an internship in an architecture firm. Did that for 2 years actually after I finished undergrad. And then the plan was to go back and get my master's at some point so I can become a licensed architect. When I was working at that architecture firm, we had a staff photographer. His name was Alex, and I owe him a lot. He was doing a photography class on Thursdays during lunch for whoever was interested. Like, there were a few of us that were just, we'd hang out, we'd talk about photography and stuff. And I had never done it, but I was always interested. So I ended up actually my mom got a camera because she always did photography, kind of like we would go to a baseball game and she would take a couple photos. And I was like, like if you want to get one, like I can, teach you everything I'm learning. And I ended up basically just taking the camera every weekend and going downtown. I did like street and city photography and got really, really into that, to the point that I bought my own camera, and I was getting invited to these events with like these groups in Chicago of Instagram people. And my now wife and I ended up deciding to move to Milwaukee to get my master's at UWM. And I I was here for I don't even think it was a few months. And I saw somebody I knew that was doing sports photography in Colorado. And I was like, how'd you get into that? Like, that's the coolest thing ever. He said, I just messaged a bunch of people until someone said, sure, come on by. So I basically did the same thing. Like, I probably sent 1,000 emails in a couple weeks, just, DMs, whatever. And luckily, I got a couple free opportunities. I didn't make any money on it, but I wanted to start to build a portfolio. And within like maybe 6 weeks of shooting my first sporting event, I had someone from Major League Baseball reach out and ask if I wanted to cover all the Brewers home games, for the league, basically doing a social position where you take photos and you provide it to the home team, the away team in the league. So I was like, yeah, this sounds like a lot more fun than what I'm doing right now. Like architecture wasn't all it was cracked up to be anyways. I wasn't designing the stadiums or the skyscrapers. I was designing the layout of where the water fountain's going to be in a school. So it was not all it's cracked up to be. So I was like, let's take a chance. And I went through the whole process and didn't know if I was going to get the job, but I basically, it was my second semester at this point, and I was like, if I don't drop out now, I'm not going to get my money back. Um, so I had to kind of take a risk, and I said, I'm going to go for it. I dropped out, took some of the tuition money back, and then luckily I got the job. Within, 2, 3 months of that, I got the same role with the NFL. And then, just a bunch of other opportunities started to roll in from there, and I just ran with it.
Well, thanks so much for sharing, those details about how you started out and everything. Take me through once you got some of those experiences under your belt, how you got to Marquette.
Yeah, so another kind of fun story. While I was doing all that stuff with MLB and NFL, I was working in an architecture firm 4 days a week to supplement the income from those being kind of part-time jobs. And the goal was always to get to full time. So I was still emailing a million people all the time, applying for different jobs, whatever. And one of the opportunities that also came across my plate was a similar role to what I did with MLB and NFL, but with the Big Ten Network. And so I had along the way I had DM'd on Instagram Marcus Howard and Theo John and a couple of the guys on that current Marquette team at the time. And I was like, hey, like if you guys ever want photos around the city, like working out, whatever, happy to take some. And they were cool about it. They were like, sure, like would love to, but just never got around to it. And so when I was working for Big Ten Network, Purdue was playing a game at Marquette and they had me shoot the game. So naturally I took a few photos of Marcus Howard and Theo John and Kobe McEwen and I sent them to them after the game. And they're like, "Oh my God, these are awesome!" Like they reached out to their ops person who was basically running the socials at the time, and was like, "Hey, like we got to get this guy in here." So they ended up reaching out to me, and she was like, "Hey, like we'd love for you to shoot photos for us." And I was like, "Oh, I'm in. Like, let's do it." So I ended up uh, basically freelancing for game days. I took photos at all their home games for the rest of that season. And then the next year I did the same thing and started to do a little bit more like social stuff, kind of more like just giving guidance on like what they could be doing, but really just more advising. And then that summer when they ended up bringing in Shaka, they had no one doing their social. So that was kind of like an area they're like, hey, we need help. And naturally, I was already there. So I started to come in, shoot workouts on my off days or in the morning, whatever, and before I start my work. And then I was putting together videos for them and all this stuff. And basically, towards the end of summer, they finally created a social director position, and the one that I'm in now. And I had to go through that whole process, took a few months, and luckily, I actually got the job and I was able to leave my career in architecture for good.
Congrats, man. That's dope. That's awesome. And
Yeah.
it's so cool when people have at these schools or leagues or businesses, whatever companies, whatever the case is, when people have the sort of wherewithal to be like, we need to put resources here, and then they do
Mhm.
it. You know what I mean? Like that's awesome. So happy for you, and that worked, and that worked out.
Yeah.
Um, Want to transition now that we talked about all the nuts and bolts of your journey to just kind of like advice and for people that are lots of people out there working in sports content, young photographers, videographers, now more than anything, because now anybody that has a phone can basically do it. And you can start when you're 10, you can start when you're 50.
Yeah.
Like it's such a industry full of all kinds of different people from all these different backgrounds. So the first thing I want to ask you, especially because you have an unconventional path, what's something that you've learned along the way that you wish that you could tell your younger self that was just starting out in this?
Well, first of all, I wish I picked up a camera about 20 years earlier than I did. But really, the biggest thing for me was just like finding something I was really passionate about. I was passionate about architecture, but at the end of the day, not enough to really want to deal with it. And when I found photography initially and then creative eventually, I realized I was so passionate about it that like it doesn't phase you having to work the long hours, the nights, the weekends. So the biggest thing is you have to make sure you really, really are passionate about it and you care and you want to do it. And the other thing is that I've learned working with Shaka's program is that you have to be in it for the right reasons. Like I care about these guys, like they're important to me and I respect them as people. And also I think that's helped drive our content to a better place because I have relationships with them beyond just, hey, what's up? How you doing? Nice shot last night. Like, it's deeper than that. And I'm always trying to show the human element of the game. That being said, like nobody likes the person who just tries to buddy buddy with the athletes for no reason. Like you want to be professional, you want to build that relationship over time. You don't want to just DM a guy and be like, "Hey, I'm your guy." Like you got to be respectful, professional about it. Like there's a lot of people that come in and just kind of expect um to jump in right away and like for everything to be handed to them. And I think like that can really be taken the wrong way a lot of the time. And I think there's a lot of that in this industry. It's a lot of me, and not we. That sounds weird. But I think you really got to be in it you got to be a team player. I mean, at the end of the day, we're working in sports. It's a team thing, unless you're doing tennis or whatever. But you gotta understand what it's like to be on a team as well. I think that's important.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a great message that I wish more people in this space would take to heart because you're right. It's, you know, at the end of the day, like we're all, as much as you can do as one person, you need that help, right? From others to make it all work and to make that
Absolutely.
workload not as strenuous. So I think that's a great message. Just overall, what's your best piece of advice for somebody that wants to, I think specifically like shoot for a team, whether it be like the D1 level, an NBA team, an NFL team, like baseball, like what would your best piece of advice be in that realm?
I think just make sure you build a strong portfolio and strong relationships. I think those are the two most important things. I mean, you're not gonna necessarily start at Major League Baseball. You're gonna, even though I happen to make the fast track for that, you're gonna oftentimes have to shoot high school baseball for 5 years maybe before you get an opportunity. At the same time I was doing all this, I was still shooting, fifth, sixth grade AAU. No opportunity was too big or too small, and nobody was above or below me. Everybody, was fair game and equal opportunity, and that's I think the right way to do it.
You talked earlier about building relationships with players, not being on the coaching side and being on the content side. What's your best piece of advice for building some of those relationships?
Um, well, I think one of the things is don't be overbearing. Like you don't want to come off like you're just trying to be their best friend. Like naturally I've become friends with a lot of these guys just because we spend so much time together, and there's a lot of interaction on the stuff we're working on. But it's not like I'm hitting them up on a Tuesday night like, hey, let's go out. It's still a professional relationship at the end of the day. So I think a lot of people misconstrue that and think like yes, I have a relationship with the players, but I'm not just trying to be their friend because they're athletes and it's cool.
Right. Yeah. Put in the personality first of athletes, which I'm
Yeah.
hoping along with people like yourself, like kind of just like the new media age that we're in, where players are doing a lot of their own stuff.
Hmm.
With alongside people like yourself, like one guy I think of is D'Angelo Russell. I know he
Yeah.
has a on the Lakers, like he is a guy that he grew up with that, um, shoots all of his stuff for him, and I think like that kind of like that's great. You know what I mean? I think, and then like podcasts and things like that are athlete
Hmm.
led. I think hopefully that will eradicate a lot of the mistrust that's been created between the athletes and media
Absolutely. Yeah.
because it's warranted. You know what I mean? Because there's some people out there, I'm sure, as you know, like you see people and they're just weirdos, man.
There's a
Like
lot of
they
cloud
don't.
chasers out there, unfortunately.
Yeah,
A lot of
yeah,
cloud chasers.
yeah, absolutely, no
And
question.
and I get it. Like I've been there when you're just starting. You see the big name and it's exciting, and you think that gives you credibility, which I said MLB gave me credibility at the same time, but I also am not out there acting like I'm better than everybody else because of it. I think there's a lot of younger creatives who come up and they're like, oh, I've done this, this, and this, and there's definitely a sense of arrogance to it.
Yeah, absolutely. I would agree with that. What's the best piece of advice that you've been given by a colleague?
Ooh, nothing really comes to mind right off the bat. I think it's just a lot of small lessons along the way, not like one specific thing that's been said to me.
Got it. Yeah, no, makes sense. I mean, it's an industry where you're taking a lot of different jobs and living in a lot,
Yeah.
living at different places. So that definitely tracks. And I think you answered that in some of your previous questions too. Um, I mean, I think one of the last things that I want to ask you, Josh, is what do you think it takes? I mean, obviously with content, like you said, like player relationships and stuff like that. Um, and just getting those connections and starting there's no opportunity too small, too big, all those things you talked about. What would you say if you had to pick one thing, like what's the most important thing you think in being able to survive in advance and kind of like move up in the business?
Hmm. I think you got to be willing to try new things. I think being open to trying new things in all aspects of life, but especially in creative, is one of the most important things. Like I was just talking about it today, the what's up brother thing like that everybody's doing from sketch. Like now all the teams in the entire country across all sports are doing it. Be original for once. Like I think there's nothing better than when you come up with something of your own. We've done things along the way. Like we were one of the first college basketball teams to start doing the extended recaps that all the football teams do. And now everybody's doing those in college basketball. We last year, not this past season, but the year before, we got a 360 camera and we mounted it to the backboard. And it was like the first time that anybody had really tried that. And to me, those are way more exciting than just doing the "What's up, brother?" like where everybody is doing it. I think trend hopping is kind of like an easy way to catch engagement. And like, sure, there's some times where it's applicable and there's merit to it, but I think overall you got to be figuring out what can differentiate you or your brand from everybody else.
Yeah, absolutely great message there. I appreciate that. Um, what is the best part? I know we talked about a lot of the sort of the ups and downs of it. What's the best part of your job?
It's just so much fun. I mean, getting to be on the court during the biggest moments of sporting events, at the highest level, like, we were just at the Sweet 16 and I get to be in the locker room and on the court. Like, as a kid, that's got to be the coolest thought in the world. Like I would have never imagined I would get to be in these places, get to interact with these types of people all the time. I grew up a huge sports fan and idolized athletes, and now to get to be in the spaces where it happens and in the inner circle, I think is really cool. And there's nothing more fun than being in the middle of the court when there's 16 to 20,000 people cheering for you. Like when we play one of my hype videos right before the game on the Jumbotron at Pfizer Forum where the Bucks play, like, and everybody goes nuts. That's one of the coolest feelings there is.
Yeah, absolutely. Really cool story you shared there. Last thing that I'll ask you, and really appreciate you being so generous with your time, Josh, is what's your why behind what you're doing in the sports media space?
Yeah. I think it's all about sharing the human element of sports. I'm always looking to tell the story of the athlete as a person, as their character, um, even just the story of the game. But it's about telling who they are on and off the court as more than just scoring points. A lot of the time, we're doing stuff where we're cutting stuff from a presser where coach is talking about cultural stuff. And we're matching it up with how they played. It's deeper than just, oh, they talked X's and O's and this guy figured out how to make this move better or set a better pick. Like it's no, these guys worked as people to get to where they are.
Absolutely. Josh Levin from Marquette, doing all the creative stuff and all the social stuff over there. Appreciate your time and thanks for joining Hoops You, Josh.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you to the audience and the listeners for paying attention to another week, another interview of Hoops U. We are University of Hoops, the podcast that's taking you behind the scenes of your favorite basketball team with interviews. People like Josh that are on the content side, along with people on the basketball side, coaches, scouts, etc. New shows coming for you every week at our social handles at Univ Hoops. That's at UNIV Hoops on YouTube, Instagram, X, TikTok, wherever you get your content. That's where we are. Thanks again for tuning in, and we will see you next time with another interview.